In this video, I'm going to cover the 3 training principles that don't just help you for a month or even a year, but will keep you progressing for decades. When you study the greats, Brady, Jordan, Bolt, Messi, you see one thing in common: a relentless pursuit of betterment over decades. So ask yourself, what could you or your athletes accomplish if the focus wasn't on competing every week, chasing what looks the coolest, or proving something to others, but on committing fully to the long game, to reaching your true peak? Because the truth is, your greatest talents can be focus, effort, and diligence, and those are available to anyone who wants them. Master the principles of going from less to more, rotating between the familiar and the novel, and applying directionality. We will walk through how these principles work together to drive long-term progress. For other elements of creating the best training programs, like choosing exercises, what training split to use, or unique circumstances, see our Creating a Program playlist. By the end of this series, you will be able to program for any athlete at any stage in their career. Going from less to more feels intuitive. If you want to improve, you expect to see progress: more sets, reps, weight, or speed. No 9th grader hopes to be lifting the same weight when they graduate. The key is understanding what this principle truly means. Misapply it, and training will be hard but unproductive. Apply it correctly, and you'll keep progressing for years, until you reach your true potential. Our bodies like homeostasis. Said another way, they don't like to change. Our bodies need a compelling reason to change and to make adaptations. For the case of sports performance, these changes might be building muscle, increasing the nervous system's efficiency, or getting stronger tendons. We don't adapt just by doing the hardest workout. Our bodies respond to a consistently applied and progressing stimulus over weeks and months. Think of it like building a staircase to your dreams. You start down here, and you can't just jump up 10 levels. You have to build the next step from where you're standing. Take that step, and then you can start building the next one. Trying to rush and jump several steps at one time is just going to lead to you falling back to step 1. The less to more principle isn't a made-up concept by strength coaches. If we don't do something more and consistently, our bodies won't adapt. Why? Building muscle or making neural improvements costs the body energy and resources. If it doesn't need to use those resources, it saves them for later. Stored energy for later is called fat, and that's why people accidentally get fat but not muscular. They eat more calories than they burn and don't give their bodies a reason to make other adaptations, so it is stored. As a principle, understanding this is important because there is no magic number of days, sets, or reps that it takes to improve. It also isn't about killing yourself in any single workout. It is dependent on what you have done previously and building from that. If you were doing no training, then 2 medium difficulty sets is likely all you would need. If you were transitioning from, say, higher rep work, like 5 sets of 10, to more strength-focused work, say 4 sets of 5. You don't need that first week of 4 sets of 5 to be super hard. Making a 5 to 8% jump in weight from that 5 sets of 10 allows for a new stimulus, heavier weight, to drive adaptation. Then, over several weeks, increase that load until you max out your ability, at least for the time being, with the sets of 5. Progressive overload is not optional. If an exercise or type of training doesn't lend itself to being overloaded consistently, it likely won't make you better, no matter how challenging or beneficial it may seem. But what happens when more isn't enough? When you stop progressing just by adding weight the next week? Well, that is where our next principle, rotating between what is familiar and what is novel, comes into play. It is the combining of these principles that allows for multi-year progressions that take athletic abilities far and above current levels. You need to change the stimulus or the focus of training every so often. This might mean going from higher reps and lighter weight to lower reps and heavier weights, or shifting from more strength work to more speed training. You rotate the familiar thing, or what you have been doing the last few weeks, with something new. But how does that improve performance? Wouldn't you lose your progress from the previous training focus? The beauty of this principle is that it works off our body's desire for homeostasis. Where the less to more principle overcomes homeostasis, this rotation uses it for our advantage. Because we don't like change, previous adaptations will stick around with minimal effort. This frees up energy and time to apply the less to more principle to another quality. Something like 1/3 the volume is usually good, especially if you are training in other capacities. For example, let's say when focusing on strength, you were using 10 sets of 3 spread out over the week for back squats, like 5 sets of 3 both Monday and Thursday. When switching to more speed training, something like 3 sets of 3 on only one day would at least maintain that strength. Now you have the energy to actually apply the less to more principle to speed training. doing some combination of more or longer sprints over several weeks. Just make sure you don't increase the speed training volume too much week 1. A 10 to 15% increase is a good place to start. You aren't used to doing as much and need some room to apply the less the more principle. I still haven't answered why you can't train for size, strength, speed, and endurance all at once. The primary reason is your body only has so many resources and limited ability to use energy for adaptations. Because the body craves homeostasis, it takes far more effort to improve something than to maintain it. So if you try to push multiple qualities at once, you'll reach a point where you're training a ton but not making much progress. That's called non-functional overreaching, when you're past your body's ability to recover. At best, you work hard and don't improve. At worst, you get injured or overtrained. And this is why most athletes stall. They try to do it all at once, but the body doesn't work that way. A smarter approach is to maintain some qualities while building 1 or 2 new ones. When those plateau, you rotate again, maintaining what you've built while developing something new. This creates multi-year progressions and is what separates good athletes from great ones. If you are willing to rotate and build patiently, you can rise to a level that you've never touched before. And if you're wondering, how do I know what principles to work on or what to switch to next? That's where our third principle, directionality, shows up. Every shift in focus is deliberate, guiding you towards your ultimate goal. It is more than training hard. It's using biology to maximize your growth and achieve your potential. Every sport has its own physical qualities that are most important to it. Speed and endurance matter more for a soccer player, while strength and muscular size more for an offensive lineman. Not that all qualities aren't important to each to some degree, but this is where you get into specifics with strength conditioning training. A soccer player will spend proportionally more time on speed work and conditioning, while an offensive lineman will spend more time building muscle and moving heavy weights. You don't spin a random wheel. Each sport applies directionality to its training program to line up with the demands of the season. Take a high school soccer player as an example. We want them to be as fast and conditioned as possible when it counts, at the start of their season in August. It doesn't matter if they are super fast in January. The goal is to peak at the right time. To do this, we work backwards, building other qualities that support that main goal. After the season, the player might focus on building muscle with lighter weights and higher volumes. Over 6 to 8 weeks, they progress from less to more. Once they've built a foundation of muscular size, they move to heavier weights, teaching those now bigger muscles to produce more force. Then those higher force producing muscles are taught to produce force faster through speed training and plyometrics. Finally, conditioning allows for these higher, faster force producing muscles to produce that force longer. This is a basic periodization plan. Each stage builds the next, leading to peak performance at the right time. As far as how long you should spend on a quality, a good rule of thumb is at least 4 weeks and no more than 12. These aren't set in stone, but solid guidelines. You need enough time to progress from less to more, but spending too much time on the same thing might lead to stagnation. Figure out what qualities need worked on the most to maximize the most important qualities entering the season and work backwards from that. Don't have a soccer player spend 8 months building muscle to leave 2 weeks for speed training. Future videos in the series will explain how to set up training for athletes who do multiple sports or need a double peak. A double peak has the athlete peaking twice a year, say March and August. This video is about understanding conceptually how a training program works, not just now, but over time. This structure allows athletes to improve year after year. Each new offseason begins with lower volumes than the previous year ended with, but progresses to a higher peak. The less to more principle isn't just for single training blocks. It spans entire training cycles across multiple years. Not only does each training block assist in building the next quality, but the new base built each year provides a higher launch pad to start the next year's training. Over time, this approach doesn't just lead to improvement, it maximizes athletic potential, helping each athlete reach levels they once thought were out of reach. Before you start planning out the next decade, let's tie up some loose ends to bring everything together. Depending on the athlete, rest or deload weeks can be included in between training qualities, or even the same quality if it's trained long enough. From experience, I know I can train hard for about 5 weeks before needing an easier week. So a 12-week strength phase might look like this: 5 weeks of heavier sets of 5, a deload week, then 5 weeks of heavy sets of 3, followed by another deload week, before moving to the next phase. I'll do a full video on deload weeks, so subscribe to make sure you don't miss it. I just wanted to make sure to touch on that topic. Smaller, younger, or weaker athletes will be able to train longer stretches without a deload week. I rarely program deload weeks for the junior high kids I train because they just aren't strong enough to create enough damage to need an easy week. Plus, often they miss a session here or there for vacation or something else that gives them more recovery. This is where some thought and experimentation needs done. There is no exact answer. Pay attention to yourself or the athletes you coach. Start cautiously. You can always increase volume or intensity later, but if you start too high, the less the more principle can't be fulfilled. Switching exercises can also count as rotating stimulus, as long as directionality is preserved. For instance, I wouldn't move from a barbell bench press to a dumbbell bench press if strength is the goal. Dumbbells are less stable and less force can be produced. But I might do higher rep dumbbell work in the early phase, then switch to barbell work as the load increases. We must also understand, the less the more principle is in reference only to the main quality being trained. So you might start training strength doing 5 sets of 5, and after 6 weeks only be doing 4 sets of 3. However, that allows for you to continually add weight and finish with a much higher load. The goal was strength, and so you wanted to progress load from less to more. If training volume had to drop to allow for that, so be it. Finally, remember that focusing on qualities still requires maintaining others. Especially for athletes, there is always going to be some form of sprints, jumps, heavy lifting, and conditioning. When trying to build muscle, you don't just train like a bodybuilder. You continue some sprinting and plyometric work, roughly 1/3 the training volume as when speed is your focus. Instead of doing heavier sets of 3, you might be doing 5 sets of 8 to 10 in your back squats to promote muscular hypertrophy and give you a little break from the super high loads and speeds of other phases. Periodization isn't a yes or no, but about fluctuations between focal points to drive adaptations that will help you in your sport. If you just stop doing sprints to lift like a bodybuilder for 8 weeks, you will build muscle, but that isn't going to translate well to your athletic performance. There's an almost endless amount more that I could say on these topics, but here's the key takeaway. Becoming a better coach or a better athlete is about applying these principles thoughtfully to the individual in front of you. There's no magic number of sets, perfect exercises, or exact workout protocol that works for everyone. Training is built on biology, and while principles remain the same, the implementation will differ greatly between individuals, and even for the same individual over the course of their training career. What works for a 13-year-old beginner won't necessarily work for them as a 20-year-old college athlete. Start reasonably and learn over the months and years using these principles as your guide. Now pause and ask yourself, what is your dream? Why are you striving to train smarter and be better? Are you willing to let that dream consume your mind, body, and spirit, casting aside everything that gets in the way? It's in your grasp. The spotlight, the championship, the victory. Your dream can be real, but it isn't built on game day when the light shines. It's forged in the shadows when no one is watching, when you meticulously plan your training and follow it with relentless intensity. That is where greatness is born. So whatever your goal, focus, plan, work, and dream bigger than you ever thought possible. At Immortal Power, our mission is to give you the tools, the knowledge, and the belief to trace that dream fully, to break your limits. If you're ready to take that next step, join us, subscribe, and let's walk that path together.